The United States government is in a lot of debt, an almost unimaginable amount. But what if I told you there's a plan? Not to pay it back, but to just make it disappear. It sounds like magic, but to see how it works, we have to start with a number that's just, well, it's pretty much beyond belief. Okay, here it is, $38 trillion. Let that sink in. That's 38 with 12 zeros after it. Our brains, honestly, they just can't really process a number that big. So, you know what? Let's try to visualize it. Let's make it physical. Imagine you started stacking $100 bills, one on top of the other. To get to $38 trillion, that stack would reach 25,000 miles into the sky. It would literally wrap all the way around the planet at the equator. I mean, that's just insane, right? And even that is kind of hard to picture. So, okay, let's try another way. Let's think about it in terms of time. Okay, let's say you had a time machine. You go back to the year zero, the very beginning of the calendar. And every single day, from that day to today, you spend $1 million. Every single day. For over 2,000 years. Guess what? You would still have to keep spending for another 52,000 years to get through it all. You'd barely have made a dent. That is the mountain of debt we are talking about. So, what does this giant abstract number mean for you? For me? Well, if you're a U.S. taxpayer, your personal slice of that debt pie is, wait for it, over $300,000. Yep, it's like having a mortgage on a house you never bought, a bill you never signed up for. Which brings up the big question, right? How on earth did the wealthiest nation in the history of the world get into this deep of a hole? Well, the story of how we got here was kind of a slow burn for a while, and then it just exploded. I mean, look at this. For a long time, the debt just kind of grew steadily. But then, boom, the 2008 financial crisis hits and it skyrockets. Then the COVID-19 pandemic, and it goes completely vertical. Get this. We piled on more debt in just a handful of years than we did in the entire first 200 years of the country's existence. It's absolutely stunning. It's funny. Well, not haha funny, but the founding fathers had a totally different view. Thomas Jefferson basically called it swindling futurity on a large scale. They saw debt as this terrible burden you're forcing onto your kids and grandkids, something you avoid at all costs. What a difference a couple of centuries makes, huh? So you're probably thinking, okay, just pay it back. But it's not that simple. Not even close. If you tried to raise taxes enough to cover this, you'd completely crash the economy. Okay, so what about cutting spending? Well, try telling voters you're slashing Social Security or Medicare. That's political suicide. And just defaulting, refusing to pay? Whoa, that would trigger a global depression unlike anything we've ever seen. All the normal options are basically impossible because they cause immediate, very visible pain. So if you can't tax your way out of it, and you can't cut your way out of it, and you definitely can't default your way out of it, what's left? What's the escape hatch? Well, that brings us to the quiet option, the one governments have turned to time and time again throughout history when they get backed into a corner like this. You could call it the secret devaluation plan. Right, so how do you make $38 trillion just vanish without actually paying it back? This really is the multi-trillion-dollar question. And the answer is actually really simple. And, well, it's also pretty unsettling. You don't get rid of the debt. You get rid of the value of the money that the debt is counted in. This is the whole game right here. It's called inflating away the debt. On paper, the government still owes $38 trillion, but the plan is to systematically, deliberately make each one of those dollars worth less and less and less over time. So the debt shrinks in real terms, in terms of what it can actually buy, even if the number itself stays huge. And this doesn't happen by accident. It's not just one thing. It's a coordinated three-part strategy. It's a playbook, really. So let's open up that playbook and see how the whole thing works. Okay, here are the three big moves in the playbook. First, you print a ton of money. That's step one. Step two, that new money causes inflation, which works like a hidden tax. And step three, you supercharge the whole process by holding interest rates below the rate of inflation. It all works together. Let's take them one by one. First up, step one, what they call quantitative easing, or QE. It sounds super technical and complicated, right? But it's actually pretty simple. The central bank in the US, that's the Federal Reserve, basically creates brand new digital money out of thin air. Just poof, with a keystroke. Then they use that new money to buy government bonds. The end result? The whole financial system gets flooded with fresh cash. And when I say flooded, I mean it. Just look at the scale of this. It's mind-blowing. The Fed printed more money in the 2 years after the pandemic started than it did in the entire first century it existed. I mean, come on. And this is just basic Econ 101, right? When you dramatically increase the supply of anything, whether it's apples or dollars, its value has to go down. And that drop in value leads us right into step 2, inflation. All that new money chasing the same amount of goods and services pushes prices up. This is the hidden tax. So who wins in this scenario? Well, the biggest debtor in the world, the government. Their giant pile of debt suddenly gets a lot easier to pay back with these new, cheaper dollars. And who loses? Well, pretty much everyone else. Savers, people on a fixed income, anyone whose wages aren't keeping up with rising prices. You know, people will blame supply chains or wars for rising prices. And sure, those things can cause short-term spikes. But the famous economist Milton Friedman hit the nail on the head. He said, inflation is always and everywhere a monetary phenomenon, meaning long-term sustained inflation really only comes from one place, the government creating too much money. Okay, on to step 3. This is the most clever and maybe the most sneaky part of the whole plan: negative real interest rates. This sounds complex, but here's all it means. It's when the interest you earn on a supposedly safe investment, like a government bond, is actually less than the rate of inflation. Let's do some really simple math. Let's say you buy a government bond, so you're lending the government your money. They pay you 4% interest for the year. Sounds okay, right? But during that same year, inflation is running at 6%. Your money grew by 4%, but prices grew by 6%. You actually lost 2% of your purchasing power. Think about that. You are literally paying the government for the privilege of lending them your money. It's their ultimate stealth weapon for making their debt quietly disappear. Okay, so let's put all the pieces together. Money printing, inflation, negative real interest rates. This isn't just some boring textbook theory. This stuff has a direct, very real and measurable impact on your wallet, your savings, and your everyday life. Just look at the last few years. From 2020 to 2024, the total cumulative inflation was about 22%. 22%! That means that every $100 you had saved up in 2020 can now only buy what $78 could back then. Nearly a quarter of its value, just gone. And there it is. That's the trade-off, plain and simple. Your 22% loss in buying power was a massive win for the government's debt problem. That inflation quietly wiped out an estimated $6 trillion of the real value of their debt. And who paid for it? You did. We all did. Every time we paid higher prices for gas, for groceries, for everything. Once you see it, you realize the evidence for this strategy is everywhere. It's the reason the dollar has lost over 97% of its value since the Fed was created. It's why wages for most people feel like they're stuck in mud, never really getting ahead, while the cost of a house has gone to the moon. These aren't separate, random problems. They're all symptoms of the very same plan. So let's be clear. The government's plan to solve its debt problem? It's working. It's absolutely working, exactly as designed. The real value of all those trillions of debt is being inflated away. Which leaves us with one final, very important question. As their debt gets devalued, what's happening to the value of your dollar?